you that don't know me, I am a current collaborator with BGL, and I was previously a teacher for the last 2 years in Taipei at Saicheng as a kindergarten teacher. And this month's PD is going to be about connecting phonics through authentic text. Okay, so today in this PD, we're going to be talking about what is an authentic text, why do we use them, how can you choose appropriate authentic text, and then how can you connect them to phonics activities that you're already doing in the classroom. And then later in this PD, we'll also do a couple activity demos that you can use on your own in the classroom as well. Okay, so authentic texts are sources that are real life stories and situations that are intended for real world purposes to explain and inform situations to native speakers. The idea is that it'll emotionally engage the reader. It's not explicit reading extraction, and authentic text can be expository and narrative. Here's a couple examples of authentic text. We have books, little readers, poems, song lyrics, scripts, menus, magazines, anything that is intended for native speakers in that language, that native speakers would read themselves. So the purpose of authentic text is to engage your ESL learners in real life situations, to develop their vocabulary, build their overall comprehension, and expose them to different writing styles and topics. Okay, up next in our Teacher Spotlight section this month, we have Audrey Taleb joining us, a former Saicheng teacher who has a lot of experience teaching phonics and integrating them with authentic text.
Hi, I am Audrey. I'm an early childhood educator. I'm certified early childhood through 6th grade in Texas and Oklahoma, also with an ESL supplement certification. So right now I'm currently teaching 1st grade in Houston, but I have worked in Oklahoma teaching pre-K, and then also for 2 years in Taipei teaching the K2 and K3 classes. And currently I'm working towards a master's in special education. Whenever I'm looking for a text, really for any skill, I always try to go back to the thematic unit that we're doing. That kind of guarantees that the text is going to be interesting and engaging and probably going to build on something that students already know. So if we're studying animals, I'm not going to read a book about robots. I'm going to try and find a book that already has some of those aspects in it. I usually try to find something that targets a specific skill. So if I know that we're working on the letters P and R, I'm going to try and find a book where the students have lots of opportunities to engage with that particular skill. I do try to keep it simple and clear, so looking for books that have repetition, that have rhyming, that have kind of some of those skills embedded into the actual words in the book. But you also want it to be interactive, so getting creative with how can I use the words that are in this book to have the kids actually do something while you're reading, physically or verbally. And then you want it to be ESL appropriate, but not contrived. So when we think about authentic text, we want to think about the types of reading that we as native English speakers engage in on a regular basis. So we're looking at magazines and menus and websites and fiction books and nonfiction books and news articles and things like that. So we're not just looking at a phonics text, the fat cat sat on the mat, which is easy to read and easy with phonics, but we want it to be a real life text, so not contrived.
So adding to what Audrey said, a theory that you can use to choose authentic text is comprehensible input theory. This is choosing material that is one level beyond their current level, meaning that they may not understand every word, but it will allow them a chance to infer meaning from context and then acquire the language naturally.
So I think some of the biggest challenges when trying to choose authentic text are, is it engaging, and thinking about the comprehension level. So sometimes when you're working with phonics, you might have to sacrifice a bit of the comprehension level, but you also want to make sure that it stays authentic, that it's not something that goes way over their head, or that doesn't make sense for them, or that doesn't make sense for the unit. So I think that's kind of one of the hardest parts is trying to decide, okay, how do I put in comprehension. And one of the ways that I like to do that in my classroom was kind of have two specific sections of the day. So one where, we might do the explicit phonics instruction, and then we bring in this authentic text to do it, and then have a separate read aloud either the next day or later on in the class that is focused more on comprehension. So kind of keeping the two objectives a little bit separate. You also finding out engaging text, especially when you're teaching abroad and you're teaching language learners, you don't want it to be this kind of like contrived that we've talked about that's, oh, cutesy rhyming, but actually doesn't mean anything, so really making sure that you're reading through the books before you get them, that you're utilizing the units that you guys are focused on at that time. And something that I do, and this is something I've always done in my classroom and still continue to do, is kind of keep a book log and take notes. So as I'm kind of planning my week or planning my unit, I want to look at all the books that I already have in my library and, kind of jot down notes. And let's say we're talking about, grocery shopping, and I come across a book that has animals shopping or whatever, I might think to myself, that doesn't quite fit this unit, but let me go ahead and make a note for that because I know upcoming we're going to be talking about animals. So let's, table that for a minute and kind of keep a log and some notes of the books that you encounter. And then, thinking outside the box, making sure that you're not just only choosing cutesy picture books, but also how can you utilize some of the literacy and the print that they're going to see in their everyday life. You think about our ESL students, the goal is to get them fluent in another language. So how can you give them text to support that? And then, especially working as an ESL teacher, you have to get creative and not be afraid to try things out. So if you are in doubt of whether or not this text is going to work, just try it out and see what happens.
Okay, so tips for implementing authentic text in a classroom. You want to structure the readings. Always do a pre-activity, read the text multiple times, engage students during the readings, and then always be sure to follow up with a post-comprehension activity. So it's also important to vary the way you read. Yes, definitely read the source naturally, but then think of other ways you can read it as well, like reading it without pictures, reading it without the words displayed, using different voices, and then also being sure to engage your students as readers as well.
So one of the best ways, I think, to teach phonics, and it's a really easy way to build upon, is using routines. So having a letter of the day or a sound of the week or the same phonics songs that you do every day. That way you have those in place already to build once you do start to, kind of build your library of text. I also like to do morning message. I think that's a good way to introduce the class, introduce the sound that we're going to be working on, introducing the book, utilizing the word wall while you're doing it. So those are kind of like a pre-reading activity. While you're reading, you can use things like student responses. So using kind of like a total physical response, that while the students are reading, you ask them, listen for a certain sound and make this action or make this noise. You can also do like student copies. So let's say that you're reading a book or you're looking at a magazine or something like that. You want to make sure that the students have a copy too, so that they can kind of follow along and even do some type of like writing while you're reading. You could also use what I like to call read and write, and it's just kind of while you're doing a read aloud, particularly with like a children's book, nonfiction or a fiction text, you might have like chart paper or your chalkboard, so that as we're coming across the words or the sounds or the letters that we're using for that lesson, we can go ahead and jot them down on the board too, either in like a list or a bubble map. And lastly, something to do after reading is after you've found some of the letters or sounds or words that you're looking for, is to put them in a sort. So maybe use a sound that they've already heard before, and then that way they can start to distinguish, okay, here's the new sound that I learned compared to the old sound that I learned, or here's the new letter I learned compared to the old, which just kind of reinforces that skill that you're targeting.
Okay, in this next section, Audrey and I are going to demo a couple of activities that you guys can do in the classroom. Audrey will be playing the role of the teacher and I'll be the student. Make sure that you pause the video after each demo and reflect on what's happening and act them out if you're watching with a partner or with a group. If not, just think about how you would modify these activities to fit your students' needs and incorporate them into your classroom.
Okay, when we are reading this book, I want you to listen for the sound. When you hear the sound, I want you to touch your nose.
Okay, sounds good.
Red hearts, white hearts, pink hearts too. I love purple hearts. How about you? You have your animal cards. When you hear the animal name, hold up your animal card. Brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Good job, there's your bird. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. Yellow duck, what do you see? I see a blue horse looking at me.
Okay, for this third activity demo, read these instructions and either act out the rules with a partner or reflect on your own. Just a quick tip, if you click on the link, The Three Little Pigs, it'll take you to a website called SlideShare, which is a great resource for free online children books if you don't have access to the physical books in Taiwan or China.
One of the best ways, I think, to collaborate, and this is for your phonics lessons and just in general when working with your co-teachers, is try to connect across content. So what are they learning when it's not your class time? What are they learning in Chinese? And see how you can bridge those two things, because if they already have the vocabulary and they already have dealt with the content, then bringing in a new concept with phonics is going to be a lot easier for them. I also noticed that when I was working with my co-teachers, English is not their first language either. So sometimes I would front load vocabulary. So it's like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about. You kind of even showing them the picture cards that we were going to use so that way they have the vocabulary and they know the expectation for the students. And that goes along with stating your goals for the students. What are you as the English teacher wanting your kids to learn during that lesson, and communicating that with your co-teachers so that if and when they support you during the class period, they know what the kids should be working on. And, even during those conversations of you talking with them about their goals, that's your time to get ideas from them as well. Like, hey, do you guys have a book that you really like that you're reading in Chinese that maybe I could find in English? Or have you seen other English teachers do something in the past that worked? So just creating a conversation about it and not just being one-ended, you come in, you do your thing, really trying to connect with them across the two different contents.
Don't forget to check out the Try It in the Classroom sections. These are some post-comprehension check suggestions that you can incorporate with authentic text that you're already doing in the classroom or that you plan to try. If you flip through the slides, you'll see that there's some modification suggestions as well that you can modify for group activities as well as for differing levels within those groups too. Don't forget to take the review quiz. You can click on the link and it'll take you to Quizlet. Make sure you choose the test option so that you can match and submit your answers. Okay, to have access to these resources, to all the activity demos and the suggestions, as well as written responses from Audrey, there's a link below this video that will take you directly to the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, let us know. Thank you.